everybody. Welcome to another episode of What a Hell of a Way to Die. It is me. It is Nate. It is 2020. Nate, how are things going on your side of the pond? How is Turf Island?
Oh, Jesus Christ.
How is
fucking stupid.
Racism Central?
Everybody's losing their minds, and basically they, rather than scrutinize the Johnson government, instead they're just losing their minds about how Meghan Markle and Prince Harry want to leave the country or step away from the royal family, which, I mean, it strikes me that people are more offended by a black American woman saying that maybe racism is bad than they are about one of the princes basically admitting that he went to Lolita Sex Island with Jeffrey Epstein on a regular basis. But I mean, that is really Britain in a nutshell, isn't it? That as long as you don't ruffle anybody's feathers, you can do all the weird, illicit, illegal, horrible sex crimes you want.
Well, the racism of England is so like astounding. Like I'm used to the racism of America because the racism of America is just fucking stupid, right? It's obviously you're an idiot if you're racist in America. But like the racism in England is so, all the tabloids for Meghan Markle versus Kate Middleton, obviously. But also when I've only read his name, I've not seen it. Stormzy, the rapper.
So, the rapper, yeah.
Yeah, when Stormzy did the interview and was just like, yeah, England's, racist. And like somebody's response to that was, if you think that it's racist, then maybe you should go back to where you came from. Is just like, was such a mind folding thing for me to read from a British person.
If I'm not mistaken, he's from Croydon, which is a suburb-ish city south of London, but that's basically part of London now.
Right.
Yeah.
He's from England. Well, and that is, like I said, it's just incredible to see the racism that England manages to do. And you know what? I'm sure Americans would do that too, but like America is so spread out that our racism has like different regional values. In England, it's just all one big racism, and it's.
Well, I mean, let me try to put this on the level here. So, I mean, a lot of British people are convinced that by voting for Brexit and ending freedom of movement, that they're going to be able to kick out all the foreigners as they see it, which to them means anybody who isn't white. Also, anybody who is white, because the people that they're going to be able to kick out because of leaving the European Union are white people. They're Eastern and Southern Europeans, but to American eyes, they're white people. They're Polish people. They're people from the Baltic states. They're people from Romania, Bulgaria. And those are the ones who are going to lose their immigration status when we leave the EU. So they're not going to be able to kick out the former Commonwealth citizens who have, emigrated and become British citizens, and their children and grandchildren, great-grandchildren are British citizens. And don't get it wrong, Britain's had a non-white minority ethnic population for a really long time. There have been black people living in Britain, particularly in places like Liverpool, since the 1700s, since America, since slavery was a thing, but then also since the Declaration of Independence and the Revolutionary War, there have been significant populations in this country of non-white people. Someone pointed out to me that every time these dumb Nazi assholes run their mouths about how London borough of Tower Hamlets, where my studio is it's like, oh, it's all Bengalis and Bangladeshis now. It's like, well, for one, no, it's not. If you look in the demographics, there's more white people in that borough than there are South Asian people. But furthermore, there have been people of South Asian descent in Tower Hamlets since the founding of the East India Company. So they've been living in that part of London since the 1700s. So how long does one have to live in this country before you're considered a full-fledged citizen? And I think that's a particular thing to address, because under the Tory government, they have canceled people's passports, both because of the Windrush scandal or also in the Shamima Begum case, where there was a teen girl who went to the Islamic State and married a fighter, and now was trying to get repatriated when 3 of her children have died in infancy. And she was born and raised in the United Kingdom. She's only ever had a British passport. Her parents were immigrants from Bangladesh, but she was born in East London, raised in East London. She's British. They canceled her passport and like, oh, just get a Bangladeshi passport. It's like, she's never been a citizen of Bangladesh. How in the fuck is she going to do that? But that's the way that their racism operates, is that anyone who isn't white can have their citizenship revoked at any moment. And and the biggest nationalist impulse in this country is basically going to culminate in them deporting like 3 million white people back to mainland Europe. So I guess the big thing I'd say here is that American racism is insane and bad, and we see it manifested in literally everything. But American racism is apartheid state racism, in the sense that they want a captive population to do menial labor so they can make money via, extractive capitalism. but it's a much smaller, not non-existent, but smaller population of Americans who think, oh, we should deport people back to where they came from. Deport Black Americans to Africa for some reason. That kind of racism, that kind of xenophobia, nationalism, chauvinism is a less common argument than just your garden variety. Oh, you can stay here, but you're not actually a citizen. We're going to have an apartheid state. You're going to have, housing segregation, medical segregation, educational segregation. You're not going to be allowed to vote. You're not going to be allowed to have actual citizenship rights, but you're going to be here and you're going to work, and you're going to work for nothing, or you're going to go to prison because you're going to make money for us. That's a different racist mentality. And I'm not trying to say that one is better than the other because they're both fucking dog shit. But there are very few people in America who want to deport every non-white person back to wherever they think those people are from, even though they're born and raised in America. There's obviously a huge population of Americans who wants to end birthright citizenship and deport Hispanic immigrants and be as aggressive as possible, and fuck them. But that's a smaller segment of the racist population than here, where they legitimately want to deport everyone who isn't white and lots of people who are white, so they can regain this fanciful notion of what England used to be back when, every third person was like a sex criminal and no one's teeth lasted longer than like their teenage years. I mean, this country fucking sucks. It has the worst weather on the planet. It's incredibly soggy and windy, and it has lots of things going for it positively, but a lot of those things are because of like its cosmopolitan character. And basically there are people who really get themselves bent out of shape over this idea that like they are in love with an England that only represents that naked guy crowd surfing in the pub when England scores a goal, and like really shitty built-in carpet and wallpaper that clashes and makes your eyes bleed. And
yeah, they're gonna.
I don't get it.
England's gonna have to find a new Australia, or they ran Australia turned into like a nice, decent country. So now they're just like, well, shit. What are we gonna do with all of our quote criminals now? But hold
on. First of all, I will not accept you saying Australia is a nice and decent country, because Australia is basically like the laboratory where they perfected racism. So it's hilarious. There's always a good laugh in Australia, but lol, what a fucking nightmare country. Secondly, on that topic, there's something really funny that recently happened. Just absolutely mind-blowing. So one of the things that one of the really dumb British politicians in the Tory party was talking about during the election, it was an MP named Liz Truss, and I can't remember what her role was, but I think it might have been like not foreign secretary, but like business secretary, something like that. And she basically said that one of their goals beyond, they fetishize what they call the Australian-style immigration system, or the Australian-style point system for immigration, even though Australia has more immigrants per capita than the United Kingdom does. Because basically, in the minds of Tory voters, Australia is a white country, and also in the minds of racists, Australia is a racist country. However, obviously, Australia is extremely racist, but there's lots of non-white people in Australia. However, Scott Morrison, the Prime Minister of Australia, recently balked at this follow-up to one of Liz Truss's comments, because she had said they were going to do a freedom of movement, free trade deal post-Brexit with Australia that would allow British people to, free movement to work in Australia and Australians free movement to work in Britain. And Scott Morrison, the Australian Prime Minister, said, no, it doesn't really stand to benefit us very much if a bunch of low-skilled British people move to Australia and just start mooching off the welfare state. I was like, holy fuck. Even your former penal colony is like, no, we don't want you. You're too shit.
Well, I'm looking forward to, in about 3 years or so, 3 years post-Brexit, when Nate disappears for about 12 hours and is just IMing me later on saying, yeah, they just pulled the burlap hood off of my head, and I'm at Central Station, so I guess I got deported back to New York City.
Exactly.
Back to where you belong.
I mean, that's the thing, right?
Who's going to be left of Trash Future? It's just going to be Milo sitting there. Hey, everybody, it's Milo, your boy.
Well, I was going to say Milo and Alice. Well, Alice will surely they'll deport Alice because they don't like trans people. And obviously Hussein and Riley are getting deported, even though Hussein was born and raised. I mean, Hussein was born in Canada, but he's raised here. And me, I canceled my passport too. We used to joke about this on the show that there was that horrible rapper Lady Sovereign in the mid 2000s who was like the white girl British rapper, and her one hit that had any traction whatsoever, I can't remember the actual song name, but she had a line in there about like, I'm English, try and deport me. And that's like not really a boast you can make because they absolutely will try now. Yeah, we could do a whole fucking thing about how Britain, for immigrants outside of the EU, it has the strictest and most insane and most expensive immigration policies. It's ridiculously punitive. It's incredibly pricey. And they basically go out of their way to make it as likely as possible that people aren't able to afford or provide requisite documentation so they can then take them out of legal status and then make them targets for deportation. It's like I said before, it's a windy, soggy, shitty island full of racist turfs, and the people who want to work here are like suffering in the sense that they're working jobs in a country that's not particularly competitive in a lot of ways, but they've got a reason to be here one way or the other. We shouldn't be impeding them. Instead, people have decided that this place is paradise, and it's like, y'all, they do have really good sausages and pretty decent sandwiches here, but this is not paradise.
All right. So enough about the trash future 10 minutes. Let's talk about
enough about the United Kingdom. But hey, you know what? People have been paying attention to the United Kingdom because of Jeremy Corbyn and because of the election, and then obviously like the fact that now we're all going to backslide to the right and have the racism light party that's going to get like 15% of the vote and crash and burn. But people want to know about Britain. So let me just tell you, Britain's not paradise. Britain is well,
much like America, Britain is good if you fall into certain class roles and demographics. And if you're outside of that, it can be difficult. Just like America. Just like anywhere, really. I mean, look, it sucks to be like, poor anywhere. And in England and America, it's a struggle to be non-white.
I guess to put it this way, so. Much like America, the things that make Britain great are the things that the worst, stupidest people in the fucking country are hell-bent on destroying and getting rid of. Like, the best way to describe it is that the entirety of English nationalism is basically that guy who's like trying to do scaremongering things in the 2016 election. Is like, what, do you want a taco truck on every corner? As if that's a bad thing. Like, that's basically Brexit in a nutshell.
I am so excited to move to my new house because there's a Euro shop walking distance from me that's run by a little Pakistani man, and he makes great Euro sandwiches for real cheap. So yeah, taco truck there, and I got a place called Chimichangas right down the street, so I'm good.
Oh God, you have no idea how much I miss good Mexican food. Which, I mean, to be fair, there is good Mexican food and Latin American food in London because there's a ton of Latin American people here. It's just not within like any reasonable walking distance of where I'm at. So I'm just gonna be jealous of you from afar, but. Who knows? Maybe when World War III kicks off and, Iran and America fucking go head to head, we might have to find like a third party nation for us both to flee to. So, and maybe that place will have good food.
The whole Iran thing is wild to me because like literally last week we had people worrying about the draft. We had, if you want to be a conscientious objector, talk to these people. We're backsliding quickly into World War III. Here it is a week later. Nobody's even talking about it. In fact, it's crazy to me because like all the no war with Iran protests that weren't able to be organized like on like last weekend, 2 weekends ago, whenever the weekend, like when it was happening, they're like, okay, we're going to do it next weekend. Those are all kind of fizzling out because we're obviously not going to war with Iran because like everybody did their dick swing at each other and Iran stepped on their own dicks. And now they have their own thing. So, like, this is such a gimme of foreign policy that Iran would own gold themselves so hard that we're just like, yeah, and you guys shot your own airliner down. Okay, well, we're gonna go back to fucking ourselves up rather than fucking you guys up because we've got our own shit to fuck up over here. So you guys go ahead and take care of yourselves. We're gonna go over here.
Yeah, it's incredible stuff, isn't it? I mean, like, I think the biggest thing to me is more that what happened in Iran is basically, so we committed such a gross act of aggression that was completely indefensible, even if you look at it from the perspective of, okay, if you're a shitlord neocon and you think we're going to, we've got to commit acts of violence against the enemy because we're fighting the enemy and this is a war, which is not. I don't believe we're at war with Iran. If we are, we should probably like declare it and actually go through the whole thing that we do for wars. But instead, whatever, I mean, as we all know, Elliot Abrams's dick isn't going to jack itself off.
Go to the YouTube page and listen to my most recent live where I talk about how we've been in the middle of World War III for the last 25 years anyway. So none of it matters. This is just another stopover in the long, slow decline of civilization as we know it. But go on.
But what I was saying is basically that, so the Iranians have this massively galvanizing moment in the sense that Qasem Soleimani is a highly respected person in Iran. The U.S. kills him in such an obviously grotesque way, and Iran responds by basically doing a show of force where they use their surface-to-surface missiles to attack American installations in Iraq, but they give heads-up notice of Iraq to Iraqis and to Americans.
They attacked Iraqi installations that had American forces on them. So America and Iran are just basically using Iraq as a place to bomb one another.
Yeah. So they do this. It's done in such a way that it winds up not causing serious casualties. It's a big show of force. But in the meantime, while this attack is going on, they wind up shooting down a Ukrainian passenger jetliner full of civilians, most of whom are Iranian citizens or people of Persian descent. And I guess the thing about it is, having spoken to people who work in the region, in 1988, the U.S. shot down Iran Air Flight 655, which was a passenger jet, shot down by a surface-to-air missile from the USS Vincennes. 290 people died. A lot of them were children. It was a horrible experience. It was a horrible, horrible thing. The U.S. only, in a very perfunctory way, ever acknowledged it was responsible. And similarly, this was a very galvanizing thing in Iran. It brought Iranians together in outrage and horror. It's a big national trauma. And so for Iran to do that to itself in this situation, it's like tailor-made to destroy the regime's credibility that might have been bolstered with the people post the Soleimani killing. Like, I made the joke, and I'll make the joke again, that it's the equivalent to if the United States defended an attack from an aggressor in this, massively calculated and choreographed way that showed its competency, but then by mistake during that, heroic defense, also crashed a plane into the New World Trade Center and did 9/11 again on itself. It would be that. And
just a hypersonic F-35 slamming it because it's on fire, as all of them are.
Yeah, exactly. Like your F-35 helmet, the batteries fail and you can't see, and so the pilot accidentally crashes into the New World Trade Center. They do 9/11 a second time. That's kind of the
and then
the
try
level
to cover
of credibility we're at.
The Iranian government tried for a bit. I mean, they ran and they got the black box and they refused to put it out. And then there was I don't know how the credibility of all the reports, but there was a chunk of time there where they're just like, no, we didn't do that. And then it turns out they did. And now
then when they finally had to come clean with it, their announcement was not particularly secretive. They were really, hey, we fucked this up. It's indefensible from us. There's no way we can explain this away. We did this and it's our fault. And I think there's an extent to which, I mean, it's a horrible thing and it shouldn't have happened and the whole thing is a nightmare. But I do think that there's a detail here that I wish people would pick up on, which is that there is this very fanciful notion of how much incredible, like North Korea plus control the Iranian government has over people in Iran and the media in Iran and the way these narratives are shaped. And so this is just not the case. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's an authoritarian country, and we can dissect that if we want to, but it's not like they just pretended it didn't happen and all the Iranians in Iran were just like, oh, okay, dear leader says so. You know what I mean? It's not like that. That's not the case. That's what Tom Cotton and Elliot Abrams and Paul Wolfowitz and Dick Cheney and all of these ghouls from, the Reagan era and the George W. Bush era and the Iraq War era would have you believe. But this is not the case.
Yeah, something else that I would point out is, after Iran shot the surface to surface missiles at the Iraqi air base, it didn't kill anybody. I saw a lot of people talking about how this was a calculated attack by Iran, that they did this so that they wouldn't kill anybody because they didn't want to escalate because of this, that, or the other thing. And then obviously the Ukrainian airline gets shot down because nobody thought to say, "Hey, we're shooting missiles. We're getting shot at by missiles. Somebody ground all the air flights before we do this." That would be that's like number one. As soon as you start shooting missiles, you say you ground all flights that are not military related. But people want to believe that like the Iranians are these like also this cold calculating. They did this. They did the calculus on this to figure out just what kind of response we would get. It's like they're reacting just like we fucking reacted, and we are all incredibly lucky that this did not that everybody basically backed down. That everyone got their rocks off for a minute. And yeah, Iran, like, not only did Iran shit the bed by shooting down their own aircraft, but in Iraq, we all remember a month ago the Iraqi people were like fucking ready to tear down their own government, right? Like students were constantly in the streets throwing rocks and protesting, and this huge push. And now at least I'm not seeing reports of it anymore, and I don't know why. I don't know if it's that the protests have stopped, or if they've gone down a lot, or if now everybody is pushing against Iran because Iran had the balls to just start shooting at basically Iraqi people and American people in Iraq's sovereignty. This is the thing. I don't know what Iran thought that they were fucking doing by shooting into Iraq. But one way or the other, we're all incredibly lucky that it didn't escalate, and that we're all going back into our corners to deal with the shit that we have going on at home, rather than trying to deal with the shit that we have going on in our backyards, I guess.
Well, yeah, I guess I'm obviously very grateful. I mean, because it was late at night here when that attack started happening, when they were shooting the missiles. And there were obviously some insane reports getting uncritically regurgitated. There was a guy who's an Iraqi, Twitter reporter, you might say, who tweets in English. He was the person who originated the claim that, at least 20 U.S. service members had been killed already. And I was just thinking to myself, I had to go to bed. And I was just like, well, fuck, this is not good. I had hoped that they would not do this. I didn't think Iran would do this because, the stakes are so incredibly high. And so the next morning when I looked up, I first thing I did when I woke up was check the news, and it showed that they had hit bases, but there weren't any casualties. All this stuff. I was thinking to myself, like, this is at least a little bit more measured, and it seems like it's been done for the headlines and for the shock value, like the sticker value in a way, as opposed to actually any consequences. And you think about when the U.S. bombed Syria, I want to say in 2018. And they shot cruise missiles at Syria, but they shot, bases where they had already been given clearance. They told them in advance. They'd notified the Russians, who had notified Syrians, so nothing was actually damaged. It was just sort of like, oh, we're gonna put a couple of potholes in your runway and say that we've vanquished the villain Bashar al-Assad. It's like that. It's annoying when that happens. It's stupid. It's absolutely dangerous and wrong, and it leads to sometimes people getting hurt or killed even if they don't intend to. And it's just like, fuck that, that's stupid. But obviously, just from a purely objective viewpoint, that's better than them actually doing surface-to-surface strikes with missiles and killing, just trying to take out as many military targets as they can, because that would have been horrendous, and that would have led to Trump going full diarrhea, and Tom Cotton would have basically thrown his old gear back on and gotten incredibly hard standing on a fucking Bradley or something like that.
Yeah, what Tom Cotton recently said had some nonsense about I swear, like it's incredible. You know how like the multi-dimensional theory is that like every time a decision is made, it splits off into another dimension. And I know that we like to talk about how we're in the stupidest timeline, but more often than not, I think that we're in just like the fucking luckiest timeline. And at some point in time, one of those splits is going to happen, and like I don't know, Trump's going to like lean against the nukes go off button and accidentally blow everything up. Jeremy Corbyn won't hit the stop Brexit button, but Trump will accidentally put his gigantic fucking ass on the nukes go off button or something.
Yeah, exactly. The dead man switch for the American nuclear military arsenal is basically now been wired to a golden toilet, and if Trump sits on that golden toilet, even if by mistake, then it's mutually assured destruction. So you got to be really, really cautious with whether or not you let him take bathroom breaks, in the fucking tactical toilet room, because it can get really, really ugly. I guess there was a weird sense for a minute there that we were going to be doing like a 2003 speed run, and that they were legitimately going to manufacture this into an opportunity
tried
to invade Iraq.
I mean, shit. Esper was talking about like, oh, we've got evidence that Soleimani was going to attack the embassy, or going to attack BIOP, and going to attack this, that, and the other thing. And look, news media is fucked right now. But at least there were enough journalists to be like, okay, but we need that evidence because we've been burned on this before, and it was never produced. So it did seem like that. Like, well, we gotta, and Iran didn't do enough damage. It didn't kill anybody. It didn't. They didn't warrant enough of an escalation to go past all of the like. The flimsy reasons to do a war. So like now it actually had to be like, well, why do you want to do the war? Why are you doing this? Why did you kill General Soleimani? And of course, no evidence has been produced. It's one of those like, who was it, Cheney or Powell, who did the whole, there are known knowns and there are known unknowns, but there are also unknown unknowns back during the Iraq war. And
I think that was Donald Rumsfeld.
Was that Rumsfeld? Yeah. God, one of these days, I hope that somebody does like those like tweets in real time about World War II. I want to see one of those about 2003 and just like relive all the hits. Like, you go to war with the army you've got, the unknown unknowns, just the massively fucking stupid stuff that happened where America was just like, oh, yeah. I mean, Iraq's bad, right? Like, thankfully, at least now. And we also have the added benefit of like, you can go on Snapchat and you can look at you can watch like Iranian teenagers who are also just like, this is fucked and I don't want it, and American teenagers saying, yeah, I get it, yeah, we shouldn't do this. So social media is a virus that's going to murder all of us at one point in time, but at least it won't be through war, I suppose.
Well, yeah, I mean, I definitely think that is a huge difference between now and 2002, 2003, is that the extent to which alternate voices and anti-war voices aren't reliant solely on the munificence, if you will, of print media and broadcast media. Obviously, our platforms are smaller than shit compared to the reach of something like MSNBC or CNN or Fox News or whatever, but they're also not completely insignificant. When you think about alternate news media and how many listeners we have, how many this show has, how many larger shows have, that's something that's there that wasn't there in '02. I mean, yeah, blogs existed, but I mean, I remember that era, and fucking hell, man, it felt like most of the blogs were conservative. Like, most of the blogs were like, we need to nuke Iran and turn the Middle East into a goddamn parking lot. Like, that kind of shit, that was way more common. And so in a way, I do think that there's an alternate voice, and I think it's easier for anti-war, or at least war skeptic voices to be out there. But I also think, too, that there's an extent to which I have noticed this pattern amongst Trump's decisions before. It seems to me that Trump will do something really ridiculously brazen, probably taking the advice of one of his really dumb, ideologically hardcore advisors. Your, Stephen Miller's, your Steve Bannon's, your Milo Yiannopoulos is, I don't fucking know. I hope Milo Yiannopoulos isn't, but I bet you he is. And do something, and then it'll make some big headline, it'll be a big scandal, and then they'll backtrack when they realize how much nightmare flack it's going to cause. I think a good example of this would be they backed off really hard when they tried to forcibly change the DoD's policy on trans people serving. And you remember Trump announced that change on Twitter. It turned out that Trump was tweeting that change to policy at the exact moments that he had been notified that the FBI were conducting a raid and search on Paul Manafort's home. And then he backed off it, and they tried to relitigate it, but it wasn't like this big, bold, huge move anymore. And I feel it's the same thing. Trump took the what I would describe as the fly to the moon and stick your dick in it course of action, and has now been, from what I can perceive, still making a lot of the kind of war cry noises, but not in a way that actually translates into genuine action. And I do, to some extent, sympathize with the people who believe that this was just meant to distract from headlines for that day when it was done. And I don't think he realized, or maybe none of his advisors realized, because they're morons too, just how much damage this was going to cause once it, and how much fallout it was going to cause once they did it. And so now they're going to try to go back to pretending it hasn't happened, even though we're all keenly aware of especially those of us who are old enough to remember the similarities that this has with when 9/11 led to them deciding we're going to invade Iraq, regardless of whether or not Iraq has anything to do with 9/11. We're just going to do it anyway.
What this really reminds me of, we've been doing war in Afghanistan, nearly a generation at this point, and we obviously don't learn from the past, and I don't mean like the British or the Russians. I mean like literally our own past. As you can see in the Afghanistan papers, we were just kind of bumbling along and just making shit up for a while. And it seems like the war drums to Iran were very similar. You had the David Brookses and the David the Frums, the David a lot of David French, all these guys doing this, racking up the opinion polls and saying, we got to do a war in Iran. You had all the people in the administration doing we got to go do a war on Iran, and it was very much like 2003, except that obviously things are not like 2003. It's 17 years later, and it rather than actually adjust and try to make some kind of change in what they're doing to push us towards war, they just tried to use the exact same playbook, and it fell on their asses so hard that I don't think that they could get away with the war in Iran for anything unless Iran directly attacks us, which I don't think they can actually do. Maybe they could shoot an ICBM at us. I don't think it would actually hit us. I'm sure that we have some sort of interception thing, but it's just, my point is, when we talk about the incompetency of this administration, it's like their incompetency is basically the same as the Bush administration incompetency, except with more racism somehow. Like at least George Bush had the speech of like, Muslims aren't our enemies, it's just these guys, and of course then it just immediately turned into Muslims are the enemy from everybody else. But they're just trying to use the same playbook, and it didn't work this time around. But also I don't know, Iraq didn't directly attack us either. Like they literally just said they
made it all up.
Yeah, they just have weapons of mass destruction, which like Iran.
You also had 9/11 though. I mean, the thing about it is that, I mean, the immediate aftermath of 9/11 was this huge pivot towards pro-war, sort of like revenge sentiments in America. But it didn't really take much to convince people.
But it was a good 18 months later, though, that we did Iraq. Like,
yeah, but that didn't matter, though, man. That did not matter. I mean, that was still, my God, dude, that was still so recent in people's minds that all they had to do.
It was a very big wound on America. So,
oh no, I mean,
I mean, you're right. Like, it was still very recent, so I could see people just be like, yeah, also fuck those guys too. Let's go blow them up.
I mean, think about how shitty people have been to Japanese Americans in all the decades post World War II. Like, there's very few people alive now who fought in World War II. Like, they're They exist, but there's fewer and fewer of them alive now. Like it's a small population. Chuck Yeager, we were making fun of him because he apparently hates British people after his experience in World War II, which is hilarious. Chuck Yeager was 20 years old in 1944 when he was stationed in Britain, prior to the opening of the European theater, or in the invasion of Normandy. He's 96 years old now. Like, there are not very many people left who were older than him who fought in World War II. And yet people are still really shitty to Japanese Americans, or at least in my lifetime have been shitty to Japanese Americans because of Pearl Harbor. So, I mean, the idea that 18 months after we were attacked on 9/11, that people were going to be, over it and be like, oh, let's be skeptical about this shit, it just doesn't really ring with my experience. Also, I mean, they played the media really hard. I mean, they had all their bullshit saying, the same people who thought they saw 9/11 are coming are sure that Saddam Hussein is trying to get nuclear weapons. Iraqi agents are buying yellow cake uranium in Niger. We have this report from Italian intelligence. Please don't ask where it came from. All this stuff. They were just dumping that shit into the media. And I mean, it worked. And this time, I think there's more skepticism. There's a hugely war-weary sentiment. There's a lot more options, I would say, for alternate media or critical media to voice its opinions in a way that just wasn't quite as readily accessible in 2002, 2003. And so it's harder for them to fabricate a case. Also, I mean, I think we're really kind of dancing around the ultimate point here. Donald Trump is a fucking idiot and his people are really stupid. He's not as good at this stuff as George W. Bush and his team were.
Yeah.
Like, they're all ghouls, but they're like the C team of ghouls. All the actual A and B team of ghouls are on the boards of like fucking Raytheon and BAE Systems or whatever. And so like they don't have time to be advising President Trump on how to make a war with Iran. They're too busy, I don't know, trying to get the Navy to find a single admiral who isn't fucking indicted for Fat Leonard to buy their ship that breaks when it gets wet.
Yeah. To be fair, Trump does have like the charisma of just like a massively racist uncle who everybody loves for some reason, but goddamn, they're all just so dumb. Like and thank God for it. Like, it's like their dump stat was wisdom on this one.
And I'm going to say this, and this is like an unpopular thing to say, but it's absolutely true. Donald Trump's a fucking idiot. He sucks. He's awful. He's a moron. He's a huge, corrupt, wet baby who's completely senile. But he's killed fewer people than George W. Bush or Barack Obama.
Deported fewer people than Barack Obama at this point, too, I believe.
Yeah, and so, I mean, like, don't get me wrong. I'd much rather have President Obama than President Trump just because of, I mean, there was a time when President Obama would appoint Supreme Court justices, and Obama wasn't appointing, guys whose sole legal credentials were having posted on like the comment section of a shitty Federalist blog to lifetime federal judgeships. However, Donald Trump, moron status, racist status, completely incompetent status aside, they haven't committed to something like the Iraq War in the way that Bush did. They haven't committed to something like Libya the way that Obama did. And as a result, you're seeing a lot more of them saying the quiet part loud. You're watching them flap around in the sense that they'll make these grand gestures, but then they're completely unwilling to follow them through. It's bad. It's really dangerous. One, if the Iranians had fucked up their surgical strike, besides the way they did fuck it up by shooting down their own plane, if they had fucked up their surgical strike with regard to like the targets they hit in Iraq, you could legitimately be seeing them giving mobilization orders to fucking reservists and National Guard people right now. If they had killed a bunch of American soldiers in Iraq. I mean, legitimately, if they wanted to, they would have had the casus belli, flat out.
Yeah.
And they don't, which is I'm incredibly grateful for, partially because officers are subject to indefinite recall. But it's just one of those things where you realize how high the stakes are and how incredibly dumb everybody on Trump's team is.
Yeah, I would. Don't worry, Nate. I'm sure somebody there could hide you. Maybe Riley. I don't know. hide you in the basement of a bunch of Canadians hiding out in England.
Hide me in a crate of Canadian wine that he's imported because it's from the Lake Niagara region and has these particular viticultural characteristics.
He's got to tell us, like, you guys can't open that crate, not because I'm hiding somebody in there, but because the current microclimate that came from, it needs about 7 more days. It needs about 7 more days to settle the tannins inside of that.
Yes,
all right.
I love it. I love it that the Trash Future universe and the Hell of a Way to Die universe have crossed over so profoundly that now we use Hell of a Way to Die to roast Riley for the things we can't roast him for in the studio without him like going on a 5-minute tirade about the soil quality of Lake Niagara.
Well, and it's funny too, because as a Missourian, Missouri is known for its wine too. We have a lot of not microclimates, but we just have a good climate for wine. It's just that you don't really see Missouri wine outside of Missouri. And apparently that's because, like, in California, you can grow the proper kind of grapes that like actually stay for a while. Like, they're good. They can be stored for, like, indefinitely. In Missouri, not so much. Like, not like, oh, it's going to go bad like in a week, but like, it just doesn't have the staying power as growing in certain places in California. So people give me shit when I mention Missouri. I don't even drink wine, but like, I can't stand people talking shit about Missouri because, like, that's my state to talk shit about. How dare you, Californians? Can't even own a gun with like more than 10 rounds in it. You fucking pussies. So I'm with Riley sometimes on that. Although I don't. Does Riley drink wine? Right?
Clearly, you don't listen to Trash Future. Yes, Riley drinks.
All I ever listen to is him defending his wine. Again, like I said, I would defend Missouri wine to the death. I've never drank it in my life, other than like in a sangria that I would make, maybe.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was just thinking about it because there's actually a winery in the town where I went to college in Indiana. They grow wine grapes there. They're not particularly good wines, but one can do it. I look at it more that, bringing it back to the topic, that we have entered into a really dangerous period. And I think if there's anything that I have taken away from watching this with Trump, is that lots and lots of people tried to tell us that you didn't really need to worry about Trump because there's only so much a president can do when all of the institutions are going to rein him in. And I feel as though the experience of the last, 3-ish years, because it'll be 3 years in a week since Trump has been inaugurated. Watching this all happen, you realize that how much of that is complete nonsense, and that institutions can't really change anything or hold back anything if the people leading them aren't willing to go down with the ship in a way, and they're not. And that's Trump, the crisis of liberalism. Yep. That's the crisis of liberalism, I think.
Donald Trump isn't the one who started the let's all be against Iran. Like, he's just another in a long, like, 60-year, 70-year long succession of fuck Iran from America. So yeah, this is all, like, none of it's surprising. At least the thing I will give credit to Obama for is, like, at least he had a thing where, like, all right, everybody can, live in peace. We can, like, when you're just angry, you don't like your neighbor, but you're just like, look, I can deal with you. It's fine. It's kind of, we had that going on, and we're ripping that Band-Aid off for reasons of racism or whatever. Like, I didn't even know what a war in Iran would benefit America for. Like, there's absolutely no reason for it. I don't know what the war in Iraq or Afghanistan we benefited from, but look, Nate, I'm just glad everybody's dumb. I'm just glad everybody in charge is really, really fucking stupid. It's sad to see that everybody in charge is really stupid because, obviously you don't want the people in charge to be stupid, but if they have to be stupid, it's good to see that they're stupid on this kind of level, where they will blunder their way into and out of a war by accident. On both sides of it, rather than be Bush era stupid, where they blunder their way into it and then we're just stuck in a quagmire for the next 20 years or so.
Yeah, I mean, I think about that a lot. That
speaking of the most recent casualties in Afghanistan, one of them was 1 year old when 9/11 happened. So we're getting We're getting closer and closer to that PFC dying in an IED blast, who was born, on after they're already joining. Like there are already people who, soldiers and Marines and whatnot who, were born September 12th, post 9/11. So it's coming, guys, and it's going to be. Here's the thing. I want to say that it's going to be a real depressing moment for all of America, but we've already brushed over World War III and moved on to the next outrage. So, which I believe was the White House this weekend. The White House the White House Twitter account posting first snow of 2020 when it was 70 degrees in Washington D.C. So we're on to something new already. We're already mad about something else, and some poor kid from the Bronx or Texas or something is going to get iced in Afghanistan, and it's going to be a blip on the radar. And people like me and Nate and everybody else is going to be real sad while the rest of the world just keeps turning. So
I mean, I'll tell you, I'll give you my perspective. I had an NCO whose first and last name were almost identical to the names of one of the NCOs who died recently in an IED blast in Afghanistan. And that was a very familiar feeling, to be really freaked out when you see it and then be relieved, but also feel guilty for being relieved when you're like, oh no, that guy who died in combat wasn't somebody I knew. It's just somebody who I thought I knew, but it turns out it's not somebody I know. And it's a horrifying thing because, that's somebody's kid, that's somebody's partner, that's somebody's dad, somebody who didn't need to be there, somebody who had no reason. There's absolutely no way you can justify them dying at this point for anything besides inertia. But then there's also that feeling of oh, phew, wipe the sweat off my brow because I'm glad that it's not somebody that I knew personally. And that has been a really familiar feeling for me throughout my military career and post-military career, is the weird guilt and the weird, I don't know, degrees of separation that exist that puts you in the position to sometimes be very rapidly pulled back into, your military experience because you've lost somebody you care about, either because they died in combat because the war's still going on, or because they died some other way, sometimes tragically, sometimes expectedly. And it's just one of those things where you realize the enormity of it, and then in realizing that enormity, you also realize how little it really accomplished, how meaningless it is. And I don't know, that then kind of multiplies the frustration and the horror around it, because it's the defining thing of our generation, and it has added up to nothing at all.
Yeah, I understand the people like the veterans who get out and grow beards and become they make T-shirts that it's like stomp on the flag and I'll stomp your ass, because that anger is probably a lot easier to process than the sadness that is to be us who are just
I mean, I have a beard and I'm an angry veteran, but I do it in a different way. But I think it's a lot easier to celebrate military culture and military and veteran identity and externalize your anger to sort of being like, fuck you libs, as opposed to confronting the emptiness of it and the waste of it, and the fact that it means something to you because you were there, but it hasn't accomplished anything that could warrant all of that horror and sacrifice and waste, World War II was a nightmare. It was very poorly fought throughout, to include the Allied campaigns. There was a lot of just an absurd amount of waste. But at the end of World War II, there was at least a thing we accomplished, and we don't have that. And this war hasn't added up to anything at all, besides some people at its periphery have made a lot of money. And maybe that makes me sound like a crank. Maybe I am a crank. I don't know, at this juncture in my life. But I wish you could point to something and say, oh, okay, well, this is an accomplishment. This is a thing we achieved. I mean, Iran is much better at fighting wars tactically than it was prior to 9/11, but that's basically it.
Yeah, and really, what is a war in Iran other than a way for the many of the veterans in Iraq, from Iraq and Afghanistan, who went the angry route, wanting to find a win, find a because look, there is no win in Iraq or Afghanistan. There's no we vanquished the enemy. terrorism's always going to be there. For every time we drone strike a Yemeni wedding, or just like blow up some stuff in the mountains of Afghanistan, you kill 2 people. But first off, are they terrorists? Probably not. But you kill 2 people and you radicalize 5. So obviously we have there is no like win there, and I guess Iran is a way to say like, well, look, they have a centralized government that we could topple. We could do a regime change, or we could go tank to tank, and it's like it feels like, and maybe this is wrong, but also maybe I do feel like I'm somewhat correct in my thinking here, is that a lot of these people who are pushing for a war in Iran, one, obviously are misinformed about our history and Iranian history, but 2, really just want a war that has a body count on both sides that we can win, and that we can put up memorials for, and we can say, look at that, we did it. Because let's be honest, we haven't had a quote good war, and by good war I mean one that like made sense, since World War II. And whatever arguments you want to do about the Gulf War or Vietnam or Korea, no, they were all dumb and we shouldn't have done it. We had no business there. And Iran, it just feels like the next stepping stone in like, okay, this is the one, we can go tank to tank. They have maybe they'll shoot down some of our jets. Maybe we can have a casualty count that's not just every week 2 people die in an IED attack. I don't know. Maybe I'm a crank too, but it really feels like the Tom Cottons and the angry veterans who didn't get a nut in Iraq and Afghanistan are really looking for a nut, and they want it here. And I just
basically, it's like, to have a new greatest generation, you have to have the blood sacrifice of World War II.
Exactly. You have to. And for every,
and there is absolutely a strain of thought in America and in the United Kingdom too. I've lived in both countries now, and I can say this is the fact. There is a strain of thought of people who are like, damn, if only we could have a huge nightmare global conflagration war, that'll teach those lazy millennials and Gen Zs to put down their phones.
Yeah, like how many Charlie Kirk and Ben Shapiro, 2 people who have never fucking had a hard day in their entire lives, probably, posting pictures of D-Day, being like, these are the real men, what happened to men today? It's like, I'm glad that nobody has to storm a beach of withering machine gun fire to fight Nazis, and that we can just, throw snowballs at them or something in the streets of Portland while, Andy No breathlessly reports on them or something. Like, this is what we have now is vastly superior to the 50 million people that died in World War II. And it's like you said, there has to be a blood sacrifice. Conservatives want a blood sacrifice so that the next generation, and I mean, shit, man, you want to talk lazy millennials? I'm about to retire from the military, and I am a millennial. Like, that's who's been fighting your fucking wars, are the millennials, and now it's all the Zoomers. And you can be angry at the lazy millennials with their avocado toast. Guess what, bitch? I had avocados in Iraq, so don't give me that shit. It was rare, but I saw them there before.
I don't think I ever had avocados in Afghanistan, but I mean, I did have some delicious salads. Don't get me wrong.
Probably, I might be thinking Ali Salim, where they actually got like really, I don't know.
Oh yeah, oh shit, yeah, Ali Salim, you get a lot of nice stuff.
Yeah, so
can I just say, Francis, we need to plug our bonus, but I want you to introduce it because it's a profound interview. I think the candidate, Isaiah James, is an amazing person. I say that also because I'm biased, because we are graduates of the same CUNY institution, and we also he's running to represent the district I am currently registered to vote in and used to live in. But I just gotta say, please introduce this, because I feel like his story is also indicative of the general global war on terror experience in a lot of ways, and I feel like you can see there are people who've been galvanized by the experience, but it's galvanizing by recognizing the total emptiness of it.
Yeah. So the interview I did with Isaiah James, it's a free interview. So it's a free bonus episode. So you guys can go out and listen to it. Isaiah's running for NY9, which is Mostly Brooklyn, or is it all
It's
Brooklyn?
central. It's all Brooklyn. It's central Brooklyn, basically from near basically south of the Brooklyn Queens Expressway down almost towards the coastline near Sheepshead Bay. It definitely covers Crown Heights, where I used to live, as well as Prospect, Lefferts Gardens, Midwood, Flatbush, a lot of areas basically. And it's currently represented by Yvette Clarke, who is an extremely establishment Democrat who did not get away completely scot-free in her last primary. There was a challenger that came very close to beating her. And so it is actually competitive, I think. And Isaiah is a really fascinating person. So Francis got a chance to talk to him.
Yeah, Isaiah he's one of those veterans that has the same story that every veteran has. That is, I went, I fought, I came home, I nearly drank myself to death, and thank goodness there's a catalyst to get me out of that, and a catalyst for change. And that's, what Isaiah wants to be. Another story that we often hear is saying, I went to go talk to my representative and they blew me off, or they didn't take me seriously. And we're seeing a lot of that. The interview I did with Anthony Clark a couple of weeks ago, a lot of lefties, democratic socialists, full on lefties, are running for these primary spots because, obviously they think, I can make a difference, not only just against a Republican, but against an establishment Democrat, against, because let's be honest, we all understand, if you're listening to this show, if you're a fan of this show, that we definitely do not like liberals, centrist libs any more than we like any kind of conservative. So the interview that I had with Isaiah James is really great. It was really great to talk to. And talking to people running in these large cities that are kind of districts that might be forgotten about because it's a blue district. It's always going to be
they're so
district.
Massively safe that they wind up being forgotten about. Yeah, which is funny because I moved from an incredibly safe Democrat seat to an incredibly safe Labor seat, and similar problems exist. Weird how that works.
Yeah, it's a Democrat. Just because you have a Democrat in there, and I say this to all the vote blue no matter who's out there, a Democrat doesn't make everything better. A Democrat is just somebody who might vote party line if you're lucky. But other than that, they're probably still going to be pulling money from establishments or it's not a campaign that's run for the people. And that's what Isaiah James is wanting to do. He's a person that's running for the people. He's a person that's running for veterans, a person that's running for people who need affordable housing. We talk about how the calculations for affordable housing in New York are just so incredibly fucked. We talk about everything from his own backyard to Puerto Rico statehood. So it's a really great interview. Like I said, it's free, and I hope all of you take the time to go out and listen to it. So if you're in NY9, get out there, support Isaiah, and push back against the establishment Dems, because we already know the Republicans suck, and it's time to get people to start to realize that Democrats fucking suck too.
Yes, they do. So please enjoy this.
Big thing to making housing affordable, and not just New York City, but all across the country, is eliminating something called AMI, which is area median income. So what happens is, I'll tell you, the whole system is rigged.
Every system is rigged.
no, but I'm gonna tell you, I'm gonna tell you how developers have actually rigged this system. There's a amendment on the federal books called the Faircloth Amendment, which states that HUD, Housing and Urban Development, cannot use any operating funds to create any new public housing at all. They can't use funds to build new public housing. So who gets those contracts? Developers get those contracts. They'll build a brand new giant building in New York, big giant apartment building with 200 units in it, and they'll make, 10% of those units affordable, quote unquote affordable. But they calculate the affordability rate by using something called area median income. Now, the median income in my district is a little over $50,000. So if they use the area median income of just central Brooklyn, these apartments would be affordable. But they factor in upstate New York, Westchester, Rockland County, Staten Island, these places with $1 million homes in them. And what does that do? That drives up what area median income should really be. So now this 2-bedroom apartment is now $2,300, $2,400, $2,700 a month that nobody can afford. And when people do move in those apartments, the landlord will wait a year and a half, make upgrades, quote unquote, upgrades to those apartments, and now they can charge market rate for them. So the system's rigged to where the government can't get into the business of building public housing. Only developers get those big contracts. Now the developers have used the AMI, which they lobbied to get on the books to be able to overcharge people for those contracts or for those houses. And now homes are just unaffordable. You can't afford to live in New York City.
So so the AMI goes outside of your district. Then it takes in.
Hell, yes.
Really?
Yes. It takes in Westchester. If you know anything about Westchester, there's some very nice, huge homes in Westchester. They're $1 million homes.
But how close is Westchester to your district?
50 miles.
50 miles. Jesus. So yeah, they're where
way outside.
AMI, right? So what did they just kind of like just put a big like 50-mile radius blob on top of it, and
it's way outside of Central Brooklyn. Staten Island is nowhere near Central Brooklyn. I got to go all the way down the Belt Parkway, get on the Verrazano, and go over a bridge to get to Staten Island. Why are we factoring in Staten Island for area median income of Brooklyn? Why are we taking in Manhattan for area median income? Manhattan has the Upper East Side and the Upper West Side, some of the most expensive real estate in America. That is factored into the housing cost of hardworking folks here in Central Brooklyn, and that's just wrong. Another thing we can do is we can institute something called a pied-à-terre tax, which anybody who owns a house over $5 million that doesn't live in it for more than 6 months, they are taxed because that's just a luxury home that is taking housing stock off the market.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I mean, and so when you say occupied, do you mean like by anybody or by yourself? Like say by yourself. So that this would be something that targets landlords as well.
Exactly.
Oh wow. So okay. So but you say that it targets people for having housing stock that's not on the market. So you mean housing stock not on the market for sale? Like rental doesn't factor into this?
Rental does, because what they do is they'll buy a giant apartment building, and they'll turn it into Airbnb does this a lot too. Airbnb comes in and buys up old buildings, and it's like an Airbnb hotel now. So now that entire apartment building that could have been used for affordable public housing, Airbnb now owns it and turns it into a hotel. So now there's 80, 90, or there's 30, 40 units that are off the market that could be used for affordable housing that are now used for Airbnbs.
Okay. What other factors are you looking into in just kind of your local area to bolster up public housing?
Well, one, we need to massively invest into public housing. We need to repeal the Faircloth Amendment. We need to repeal the Erstat law, which was we need national rent control in this country, all over this country. We need to establish community land trust and invest more into the co-ops where folks can own these buildings, not just rent them, but they can rent them and own these buildings and pass to home ownership. We need veterans, as you know, veterans have the VA home loan program that gives us little to no interest loans to buy homes and houses. We need a program like that nationally for folks, for hardworking people who are making, less than 80, less than 70, less than $60,000 a year. Because home ownership, as anybody knows, is one of the key avenues to build generational wealth. And for people like me who look like me, I'm a large black man, guys. People who look like me in my community have been shut out traditionally from those avenues of home ownership and generational wealth. This would go a long way to reversing some of the wrongs that America has, perpetrated against people of color. In my district, believe it or not, is 65% people of color.
Now, but wouldn't something like that, because I'm all about, I use the VA home loan myself, and what it is, it's not necessarily low interest, it's no down payment. Under very specific circumstances, like my house currently does not fall under that because it's an old ass Victorian, and the VA is very stringent on some of their stuff. But we had a housing market crash because we had a lot of risky purchasing.
Subprime loans. Yeah.
Right, subprime loans. That's what not to tell you that you're wrong, but I'm wondering, how do we, what's a way to prevent something like that happening if we are doing this, if we're going to push towards it?
I'm glad you asked that. You had those risky subprime loans. You know why? Because housing is commodified, and banks were making those loans. Banks were the ones trying to get as many people to sign on the dotted line as they possibly could so they can get mortgages in the door. Now, if you take banks out of the equation and Uncle Sam is the lender, Uncle Sam is giving out the loans. Uncle Sam's not making subprime loans because Uncle Sam's not going to come back and take your house. Uncle Sam is the lender giving you these loans for your house, and you're paying Uncle Sam back, not the banks.
So another thing that really goes hand in hand, two different issues that are separate on your on your site, but I feel should be discussed together. One is gun control, and the other is police reform. Now you're a veteran, and I am too. I'm a gun owner. But I'm also 100% behind most, gun restrictions. As over the New Year's Eve at midnight, I had to go outside of my house and yell at my neighbor for one of his idiot brother-in-law was outside shooting a gun off into the sky. So yeah, yeah, I know. It wasn't great. It was not a great New Year's Eve for me. I mean, imagine just a gun going off, basically 20 feet from you when you're a veteran. It's not great for your brain. So common sense gun control is great, and also the police reform. Do these things go hand in hand for you in some kind of way? Yes.
So before we start this, would you like to see my concealed carry
okay
license?
And that's the thing. I know guns and the left are difficult to talk about because you have some leftists who are 100% anti-gun, and you have people like you and me who own guns and like guns, but also we understand that there should be some kind of restriction because God knows we've both come across. There you are. We've come across more than our fair share of idiots with guns. I would show you my conceal and carry license, but in Missouri, you don't have to have one. You can just carry a gun concealed, which makes no sense. Which is insane.
That's not going to lead to any problems.
No. Also, I can buy and sell guns, and in fact, have bought and sold guns out of the trunk of my car. Now, to people I know, to other gun
but that's
owners.
you.
Yeah,
I'm as a veteran being responsible to somebody you know. Now, imagine somebody who's just a straw purchaser of guns selling them to anybody. So the thing about guns is, like you said, a lot of people are on the left don't know really how to broach the subject of guns because they've never held them, owned them, operated them, or used them in the capacity in which they were made for. Like I said, I'm a 3-time combat veteran. I carried a gun for damn near 10 years straight. And when we're talking about handguns for personal protection and all that stuff, I have no problem with that. No problem at all with you having a gun to protect yourself, to protect your home and your family. What my problem is, and will always be, is with assault rifles. And people can say, well, there's no such thing as an assault rifle. I'm like, listen, I don't play semantics with people's lives, okay? The goddamn M4 that I used in combat that people own, they shouldn't be allowed to own these things. Think about it. We aren't the only country with people with mental illnesses. They're all over the world. We aren't the only country with people stressed out over problems. We are the only country, industrialized country, in which these mass shootings occur with such frequency that we see them in the news and we just scroll by it because it's another thing.
All right, everybody. Thank you once again for jumping in with us. Remember, you can follow me at Army Strength, follow Nate at In These Deserts, follow the YouTube, follow the website. Everything that I mentioned at the beginning, we don't need to rehash it here. So, as always, thank you for listening. Thank you for being Patreons. Thank you for sharing, and we will talk to you next week. Zoom, zoom, zoom.